Hey, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, it's another year, another time to make some more money, and I've got the course for you. Start the conversation, get the meeting will help your team, both business development, sales development, get into those new cold accounts, whether that function is under marketing or sales. I'll help you with that by starting organic, natural conversations, not pitching. Have people open up with you, build up a connection with them, understand your total addressable market, prioritize it, and put in a system that scales, that's predictable, that works the way you want it to work instead of the old school pitch. Believe me, I've sat through so many of these cold calling seminars, courses, books, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and it's evolved. And what I'm doing today is what's working in today's world. It works naturally, and people are just loving it, getting meetings, closing deals, and doing it without the rejection that is typically there in sales. So check it out at b2brevenue.com under the training tab. You can schedule a call with me. We can talk it over. I'll explain how it works and how we can work together on it. You can buy it per student, or I'll customize it for your particular product and team and coach you through that process. Also, if you're a sales leader and you want predictability, you want direction, momentum, and control with your deals, you can sign up for that course as well. Same type of model. A year-long access to it. It's content, community, and coaching, all included at b2brevenue.com. You can get my free ebook there on how companies make product selections. That's all free. Let's get into the interview, but I want to make sure you're checking out my partners. They're in the show notes. This week, it's Pipedrive and CoVideo. Pipedrive is the new CRM. It's been out for 5 years. I've been using it forever. I love that. It's connected up with your email, your calendar, and now they have team capabilities. CoVideo is the video email system. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's the way to break into new accounts. It's so much more engaging than text. Check them out. Also, make sure you're checking me out on LinkedIn, Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn. Let's get into the interview. I'll sum it up at the end. Hey, Chad, welcome to the show. As a way of getting started, tell us about yourself.
Hey, Brian, thanks. Yeah, Chad Miller from Nashville, Tennessee. I run an organization here called Performance Solutions Group, and we're a sales, leadership, and recruiting consulting company specializing in placing military veterans to work in the sales and leadership community. Served as an Army officer in the 101st Airborne Division, and then spent most of my corporate career with a Fortune 500 sales organization, and then started my own Performance Solutions Group in 2011, and just fired up to help sales managers and sales teams be better. And
what was that transition like, going from military to corporate? I mean, that must have been a little bit of a shift.
It was really tough at the beginning. There was a lot of unknowns, and the reason I've created my military veteran placement division is to help bridge that gap and help be a liaison for military guys going into sales. It's a great fit, but there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and really the hardest part for military veterans is there's really no gray area. It's kind of black and white in the military, and it's either you meet the standard or you don't. And the military guys have to kind of calm down or chill out a little bit, if you will, when they enter the civilian world, because they seem to outwork most of the civilian population, and they have to understand that the rigorous standards that they were held to aren't quite as rigorous in the civilian world.
And I worked with one of my first sales jobs. The guy in the cubicle next to me was Air Force Major, and I kind of saw not only the discipline, but the understanding of human dynamics was by far more than most of the other sales reps. I think he had the understanding of how teams work, the political dynamics, and just good human interaction skills. I think the military, I think it's understated how great people coming out will do in sales.
Absolutely, and you deal with such a wide range of human behavior, and I think that's what makes
Nice
it
way
so
to put
valuable.
it.
Yeah, because it's one moment I was a second lieutenant out of college, and I was in charge of I was 22 years old, in charge of 36 souls and $9 million of equipment. So you have to grow up pretty fast.
Yeah.
And one minute I'm counseling an 18-year-old private about why it's the third day of the month and he has no money, and doing financial counseling, and then the next minute I'm trying to sell my battle plan to a lieutenant colonel and getting my rear end handed to me because he doesn't like my plan. So, that to me, that trained me to go up against really hard-nosed buyers, hard-nosed decision makers. It also trained me to not underestimate anybody in the buying process. I spent most of my career in the commercial truck industry, and you deal with a lot of maintenance individuals and things like that. But I always tell guys, like, don't underestimate the guy that's in the shop turning wrenches, because one day that guy could be making decisions on buying trucks or whatever. And so the military really prepares you to deal with, all different kinds of education levels, different attitudes, work ethics, and that kind of thing. So it's a super good training ground.
And people coming out, what are their concerns about getting into corporate when you're talking to them? Do they underestimate the skills they have? Are they scared off of the structure and the suits?
It's all of that. So guys are sometimes definitely scared of the word sales. Yeah. When they hear the word sales, they think of somebody outside the military installation that screwed them over on a used car. And they don't understand. They think everything's B2C, and so I have to do quite an education process on the B2B, and tell them, hey, you're going to be a trusted advisor, you're going to be a problem solver, that type of thing. And so they battle with that. They battle with skills translation, and that's where we come in. Is we speak business and we also speak military, and so we're able to help them with resumes and help them with the interview prep process to where they understand that they can do the corporate jobs. They just don't know yet that they can do those. So yeah, it's a challenge there. And then what we see most of these guys, especially the officers, the commissioned officers, which what I got out as a captain, is they're looking for logos and big names and things that they recognize. So when they, you'll often see them bypass an opportunity and blow right past a booth or a representative from an unknown company because they're looking for those large Fortune 500 companies because that's all they know. And so we have to kind of educate them on opportunities that may be, not well known, but very, good and lucrative opportunities as well.
And I think B2B sales is probably the best kept career secret out there.
Absolutely. I tell you, they want an easy, they want to stay in operations. They want to do administrative and all they want to tell us about is their list of degrees. And, mostly a lot of these guys, especially enlisted guys, they'll tell me about their 14 master's degrees that they have from University of Phoenix. and I just wait for them to stop talking. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about real things. And that's what I emphasize all the time is like, I say this over and over again, is that your ability to clearly articulate your experience with both problem solving, leadership, character is far greater than any degree that you have. And sales is a wonderful, lucrative background, but what scares them is they've been receiving a government paycheck every month, and this whole sense of commission is foreign to them. But when we work with our partner employers too to say, hey, here's the situation where they're coming from, and, can we do some type of first year guarantee to where they're getting a monthly paycheck for the while they train, and then usually in the first 4 to 6 months these guys are crushing it and understand the world of commission. And guys like you and I don't want to work on anything but 100% commission. That's what we do every day. And once you learn how to sell, that's the plan you want to be on. Well,
you have the control over it. And I remember the first time was kind of under that premise of, I was an engineer, and it was like, degrees were important, but also just, experience, knowledge about every programming language. And then I went out with the salespeople, and I found out their base salary was my target salary.
Right.
And I was working 80 hours a week, and they were scooting out at about 5:15 every day. And
exactly.
I said, I could pretty much I'll figure out that part. And I think that's kind of one of the downsides of, because I've sold to the government as well. The government kind of culture is degrees. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, it's misleading, I think, in today's job market.
Absolutely. And I think they underestimate the success they can have. I mean, we've had some cases in our history where we've placed really candidates that you wouldn't believe that would excel in sales. So I'll give you an example. I had a what's called in the Army a staff sergeant, or an E6, which is kind of a mid-level enlisted non-commissioned officer. And this individual was a ranger in the Army. He taught at pre-ranger school. He was just a tactical instructor in the infantry. And we placed him with a major manufacturer, and he took over a Texas and Oklahoma sales territory. And he's blowing things up. He's doing great as far as not blowing things up in the military, but he's blowing up sales. And we just found that he was just hungry. And this guy's coming to the interview telling me about Brian Tracy books that he's read, and just hungry for knowledge. And that's what we're looking for. And I tell these employers, I'm like, you take a kid like that and teach them your product or your procedure, and you're good to go. And most of our guys say, hey, send me 10 more of these guys.
And that's it, because I talk to sales managers every day, and one of the top things is coachability. And I don't think you can be in the military if you aren't coachable.
You won't last very long, or your advancement rate will be severely slowed.
I wasn't in, but I watched enough movies and TV shows about the bus showing up at boot camp to understand that coachability is critical.
Absolutely, yeah. It's an interesting environment, but it fosters this level of work ethic and just striving for excellence, if you will, on a daily basis. And there's so many CEOs out there, C-level executives now that are ex-military guys, and it just makes it's a great skill set.
Yeah, and the competitiveness, I think that's ingrained. I mean, because let's face it, the military is competing against an enemy.
Absolutely,
that's the purpose, and so that's kind of ingrained in their role for that minimum 4-year stint. And they come out and they want to beat the competition.
Oh yeah, and we trained, and what helped me so much in my sales career is the way we trained the Army is that we would receive an intelligence briefing, which would be similar to doing your LinkedIn research and your qualification and everything like that. And then we would do mission planning, which would be like pre-call planning. And then we would execute the mission, AKA go make the sales call. And afterwards we would do what's called an AAR, or an after action review. And we would review how we performed, what went well, what went bad, what we need to replicate next time, what we need to avoid. And that's like sales 101. And so if you can translate that, it's golden.
And how about, I think the only characteristic I think that's missing is kind of the maverick, the little bit of a rebel, a little bit of thinking outside the box. Has that been an issue?
So we work with sales managers and executives on that, because you are right. Like it's so ingrained as far as rules, regulations, yeah. Meeting the standard, is there's not a lot of flexibility around kind of creative, not so much creative thinking, that's probably the wrong words, but there's so many standard operating procedures or SOPs out there that are already established that most of the time the guys aren't having to think very hard about, creative solutions. And so, that's one of the things we do in our candidate counseling is that, hey, this is something that you need to be aware of, is sometimes in the civilian world, you're going to be asked, your opinions on things, and you're going to be asked to create solutions and come up with ideas that may not be in a manual or a procedure anywhere.
Yeah.
You may have to just think on your feet and get it done. That's where a lot of our special operator community guys are really good at, is that they have to do that. They're in these, Afghanistan villages, and they're having to make spot decisions and make things happen quickly and creatively. And so that kind of special operator skill set works well there.
And how about as far as like getting over the degree objection? Is that still important to a lot of hiring managers?
It depends on the organizations, Brian. It's just, a lot of your large corporations will have it. I remember when my first corporate or the job I accepted come out of the Army, it was literally a rite of passage. So during the interview process, do you have a bachelor's degree?
Yeah.
Check. And then next question. And I have a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. So
that's applicable.
All I needed, all I needed was a 4-year degree, and I passed the test. But we're finding some of the larger corporations are still holding fast on that, and then some of the middle to smaller organizations, they don't mind as much. Like it's a plus, and it's good to have. But we work with a lot of dealerships across the country. So we work with you take, for instance, a major truck manufacturer. It has a network of dealerships. So we not only work with manufacturers, we also work with the dealership groups. And the dealership groups really don't, put a lot of stock in the whole degree situation. They're looking more for character, work ethic, and they want to see results pretty quick.
Yeah. How about as far as technology companies? Have you ventured into that? Have you discussed it or approached them?
We're wanting to expand into some of those areas. We've stayed kind of close to what we know because I've spent most of my career in the trucking industry, and the truck industry is so big that we've stayed, but we have ventured out in related spaces. So like operations, logistics, distribution centers, transportation, that type of thing. But I am finding more and more of our service members coming by and asking me about cybersecurity and IT professions. And so we're on the hunt now for some new employment partners where we might be able to help those veterans find positions like that. But I do know those skill sets are being taught in the military right now.
And just good, communication skills, either on the phone or online, good, reasonable written skills, reasonable online research skills. Because certainly what I see in the technology, this area is this new role, not really a renaming of a role, called sales development reps.
Yes.
And it pays really well. And, you don't have to be in a car. You can be at a desk in a nice air-conditioned office, sitting down. And it pays super well. And I would think that, certainly as an entry level, coming out of the military, it would be a great match.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because the environment that I would work in, a lot of time, I had a kind of a split role between being out in the field, in the trees, if you will, with the guys, and then also being in what's called a tactical operations center. But there's these tactical operations centers where it's like there's a battle captain and there's a staff that basically runs the behind the scenes. And so there's maps and there's documents being, operations orders being produced and future plans being looked at and tons of analysis. And so pretty much everything that happens in the military has to be documented and written down. So you see all these people having to write formal orders. And then, I laugh at people all the time. It's like I never have taken a formal course in PowerPoint. The Army taught me PowerPoint. And so I had, as an Army officer, we used to joke and say we were PowerPoint Rangers because we had to learn how to produce slides and present those. And so you learn a ton of those skills. So all of your non-commissioned officers and commissioned officers coming out are going to have really good writing skills, really good PowerPoint skills, and that type of thing, those things you're mentioning.
And what kind of pushback do you get from the hiring managers when you approach them?
A lot of our industry guys put a ton of stock on industry experience, and we're trying to kind of re-educate and ask these guys to think a little bit out of the box on that going forward. Is they'll say, hey, I'd rather hire somebody that has a book of business and already knows our industry. And our pushback to them is that, hey, do you not only is it a legitimate book of business and can they bring it, and also are they going to bring a bunch of bad habits that you don't want to deal with? And I said, wouldn't you rather just train somebody fresh that has no bad habits, that hasn't been trained by somebody else? But that I would say that's the biggest pushback is hey, I can find this guy over here and pay him a little bit more and he can bring business. And normally those things don't work out. Those guys in interviews, they talk about they did this and they did that. And we always like to say to our employers, I said, you don't want to be the next they, because if they're coming to the interview talking about their previous employer negatively, then you could be that guy in a couple of years.
Well, that's it. And when you hire, from your competitors, guess where they're going next to yet another competitor.
Right. I always say it's a revolving door and everybody just changes logos every few years. And so I say, hey, let's get some fresh talent that doesn't really know. And I think it's a competitive advantage if you take a guy that doesn't really know the bad parts of the industry and that kind of thing. There's a different level of optimism and willingness to try, where some of your veteran guys, how many times have you heard it, Brian, where the guy's like, well, we're locked out of that account. We'll never get it. We'll never get in there. Yeah, and the new guy may say, let's go beat the door down and figure it out.
Yeah, they're having lunch with them tomorrow.
Right. Meanwhile, the veterans locked out.
Because that is probably number two that I hear from hiring managers, is that certainly the toughest jobs, getting into new accounts, getting meetings, doing the cold outreach, handling all the rejection, that people can only last in that 6 months or a year. And I'm like, well, I've lasted it a lot longer than that. But it is hard. I get it. But, it's something that's certainly not taught in college or high school. I mean, you either, experience it in the military or through sports or poverty or necessity. It you get that grit.
Absolutely. I've seen it before. I saw a quote somewhere on LinkedIn this morning where it said, success is not owned, it's rented, and the rent's due every day.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset in the military. It's almost like you had to prove yourself every single day. And many days you'd get your butt handed to you by some senior NCO or some senior officer, and it just made you sharper. And so I think this whole fear of rejection thing, I think you take, a younger generation college graduate compared to a military NCO or an officer, that's going to be a big point of difference for them, is that the college student has led a pretty cush life and hasn't been critiqued nearly as hard as the military person has. And so I think that fear, the rejection kind of disappears because those guys get rejected every day.
And sales is a performance profession, and so is certainly being a soldier, right? I mean, when you're you're on. And, it's a lot more than a deal that's at risk. It's your life. It's your friend's life.
Absolutely. Especially in the combat arms area, there's no margin of error there. And so it's just like you have to be on your game every day, and that's the standard. And so there's no like, hey, we've done this much stuff and now we can just chill out.
Coast.
You got to reinvent like every day. Like, and that's what, a lot of the veteran sales manager would say, hey, you crushed it last quarter, but what have you done for me today? It's like,
every
you're
day,
like, okay, well, you had a great mission, and then, all right, what are you going to do with this one?
Exactly. Hey, so who would be your ideal client? Give a shout out for them.
Absolutely. So we're looking to partner with like vice presidents of sales, vice presidents of manufacturing operations in companies that value military veterans that are maybe interested in military veteran hiring, but really don't understand how to do that. And that's kind of how we position ourselves, is we're basically your outsourced military hiring division. So a lot of companies do not have the time, expertise, or resources to do what we do and get into all the installations and go after. So we're looking for, small, medium, large organizations that have hearts for veterans, that understand what they bring to the table and want, a guide service like us. That's how we position ourselves, is we're a guide for organizations that are interested in military veterans, but may not understand what they bring to the market or how to get to them and understand their qualifications.
And where would they contact you at?
Yeah, so you can go to PSG, as in P, as Papa Sierra Golf Jobs, psgjobs.com is our website. That's also our Instagram handle, at PSG Jobs. And then you can find me, Chad Miller, Nashville, Tennessee, on LinkedIn, and we'd love to help.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Hey, make sure you check us out on LinkedIn. And B2B Revenue is the website. You get the free ebook there. You can learn about the courses. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Brian Burns Sales Podcast on YouTube, where I store both these podcasts, my videos that I do daily on sales and marketing tips, all the webinars are hosted there. So if you ever get lost and you don't know where to go, Brian Burns Sales Podcast on YouTube is a great place to be. And you can sign up to get on my calendar at B2B Revenue under training, and we can talk over your sales and marketing situations about getting you into your dream accounts in a fast, natural, organic way. And if you happen to see my content fly by on LinkedIn, I'd really appreciate a like or comment or a share, and we'll see you next time.